Well, uh, it was such a shock on two levels. First of all, we could say that uh, we knew something was coming because change was in the air. There'd been a lot of racial activity across North Carolina, particularly in the east. But this came out of the blue and it dropped down in the middle of five or six white guys who had no idea of how to handle a situation. It was a different kind of TV world. We did not have the equipment that we have accumulated over the years because people went in the streets. So somebody had to say, well, we got to do something. What's it going to be? Well, time was against us. With what we had, we couldn't get to where we needed to be to get it back and get it on the air.
But you felt it was important to do it.
Well, I felt we might be on the verge of a civil war, an interracial war. And it is, we just had to do it. That was all there was to it. I knew the Woolworth Company. I grew up in the Woolworth Company. My daddy managed a Woolworth store for his career. I worked in the basement, bringing up the goods to the counters. And I knew the district managers in Atlanta. I knew the store managers in Greensboro. My dad had trained one of them and retrained at the downtown Woolworth after he came home from service. And this was happening. And the lunch counter at Woolworth was a hallowed place. I mean, it was the best, the cheapest food in town. Those red stools had made the red fronts popular all across America and parts of Europe.
So as you went on to do the Good Morning Show, tell me how you made sure over the years that you were representing the entire community, not just certain elements of the community.
Well, I had grown up with a black community in Concord, North Carolina. And I had learned great values from the men that took care of me better than my father did. I went on truck trips with them when I was 6 years old. So I understood that part of the dynamic. But outside of the four African Americans employed, two men and two women at Channel 2 as maids and janitors, we had no connection with the black community. None whatsoever, other than the African American preachers who were in the preacher rotation that came in for the morning devotional. So we didn't even report some of the basketball scores. Vaguely knew where Dudley High School was. It was as if East Greensboro was a community unto itself. So we had to start building. And sometimes it got rough. There was a stint when I was community affairs director. I had a lot of folks in my face and a lot of spittle on my clothes. But you know what? Dadgummit, they were right. It was unimaginable. I don't know anybody in my family who would have said they needed, the black folks, the African Americans, needed to get their freedom. They needed to have their justice. They needed to have the America that they helped build. And, all of a sudden this was exciting. And first I convinced a few people that, hey, I'm for real. And then they started knocking on the door. And Skip Alston, Earl Jones almost knocked the door down, and they started bringing in people to the show. And other folks said, well, have you heard of Kwanzaa? And they started coming to the program, and it just happened. And then when the tragedies occurred, the 1979 massacre, as they call it now, Nazi Klan shootout. Shirley Fry, Jim Melvin, we all worked through. I gave them the Good Morning Show. We brought in some hardline activists to talk about, to get the issue out. And I thought about, well, what is this going to do to the ratings on the program? And then I said, oh, the heck with it. You know, this is something that is happening. But I have to say this. When I walked out of the 20th anniversary celebration of the sit-ins at the Woolworth in 1980 that we televised live, and we had the original sit-ins there, I thought we'd healed. I thought it was over. I never thought he'd come back. And I think we have to ask our question. How many times do we let the racial problem come back, the interracial problem, until we get it settled? I mean, we're using energy that we could use to build the bright city on the hill, for crying out loud. I mean, Greensboro, of all the civil rights sites that I know, is the most historic. Not only did we have the Woolworth sit-ins, but the founding of local television news, as it exists today, was born in these streets because of the marches led by Jesse Jackson and his colleagues, and for the folks who joined in those marches at risk of jail or their lives to establish a new and solid America. And we're not there yet, but I don't think the divide is nearly as great as it used to be, thanks to institutions like the International Civil Rights Museum and Convention Center. And I hope this goes on to be a huge landmark and repository of information. This award, and my family believes this too, is the greatest award that I have ever received for any work that I have done by accident or intention. And it will be dedicated by me to the memory of Holly and Doris Brewer. Holly, known as Sheep, was my grandfather's foreman for 50 years. Cared for the old man when he died. And he taught me the values of life. He taught me how people can live together regardless of their color, their race, ethnicity, anything. We are all human beings, for crying out loud, and let's act like human beings. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.